Imagine a weapon so powerful, so terrifying, that it scared not only its enemies, but also its creators. This isn't science fiction. This is the story of the Tsar Bomba, also known as the Devil's Bomb, a Soviet experiment that pushed the limits of human destructive power and brought the world to the brink. In the height of the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a dangerous dance of one-upmanship. Each side desperately sought to prove its military and technological superiority. This frantic arms race gave birth to some of the most fearsome weapons ever conceived, but one would stand above them all, a true monster of the atomic age. The idea was born from a desire to create a weapon of unprecedented scale. Soviet scientists, led by the brilliant Andrei Sakharov, were tasked with building a hydrogen bomb with a yield of 100 megatons. To put that in perspective, that's over 6,500 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It was a theoretical nightmare, a doomsday device that could unleash unthinkable devastation. The project was officially designated RDS-220, but it earned other more chilling nicknames: Big Ivan and Kuzma's mother, a Russian idiom for "we'll show you." The design was a three-stage thermonuclear device, a complex and groundbreaking piece of engineering. However, even the scientists working on it began to have serious reservations. They understood that a 100-megaton detonation would create a catastrophic amount of radioactive fallout, poisoning the atmosphere and potentially circling the globe. Faced with these dire predictions, Sakharov and his team made a crucial decision. They modified the bomb, replacing some of its key uranium components with lead. This would slash the explosive yield in half to around 50 megatons and dramatically reduce the resulting fallout by over 97%. It was a compromise, but even at this reduced power, the Tsar Bomba was still by far the most powerful weapon ever built. It was a test of what was possible, a terrifying demonstration of force. October 30th, 1961, a specially modified Tu-95 bomber, painted reflective white to offer some protection from the thermal blast, took off from a remote Arctic airfield. Accompanying it was a smaller plane, tasked with filming the event and taking air samples. The crews of both planes knew they had, at best, a 50% chance of survival. The bomber flew to its designated test site over the Novaya Zemlya archipelago in the Arctic Ocean. At an altitude of about 6.5 miles, the Tsar Bomba was released. To give the pilots a fighting chance to escape, the bomb was equipped with a massive parachute, slowing its descent and allowing the planes to fly about 30 miles away before detonation. It was a race against time, a desperate flight from the monster they had just unleashed. Then it happened. At 11:32 a.m. Moscow time, the Tsar Bomba detonated 4 kilometers above the Earth's surface. The result was apocalyptic. The fireball was 5 miles wide. It was so bright it could be seen from over 600 miles away. The mushroom cloud soared to an altitude of 40 miles, punching through the stratosphere and into the mesosphere. It was 7 times higher than Mount Everest. The heat from the blast was so intense it could have caused third-degree burns over 60 miles away. A village 34 miles from ground zero was completely leveled. Buildings hundreds of miles away had windows shattered and roofs damaged. The shockwave was powerful enough to be measured on its 3rd trip around the globe. For a moment, all radio communications across the northern hemisphere were blacked out. The pilot of the Tu-95, Major Andrei Dunovtsev, somehow managed to fly his plane through the shockwave, even as it dropped a kilometer in altitude. He and his crew had survived, against all odds. But what they had witnessed would haunt them forever. They had looked into the heart of a man-made sun, a power that had no place on Earth. The world was stunned. The United States had been monitoring the test, and the seismic readings were off the charts. The sheer scale of the explosion was almost incomprehensible. It was a clear and terrifying message from the Soviet Union. We possess the power to destroy entire countries. But the test had an unintended consequence. It scared everyone, including the Soviets. The leader, Nikita Khrushchev, had wanted a show of strength, but the reality of the Tsar Bomba was sobering. The weapon was simply too big, too destructive, and too impractical to ever be used in actual warfare. It was a political tool, a symbol of power, but its military value was zero. The experiment terrified both sides of the Iron Curtain into a moment of rare clarity. The test, more than any diplomatic negotiation, highlighted the absolute insanity of the nuclear arms race. It showed leaders on both sides that they were walking a tightrope over a chasm of mutual annihilation. In the aftermath, the international community reacted with alarm. The terrifying display of power from the Tsar Bomba test accelerated talks for a nuclear test ban treaty. In 1963, just 2 years later, the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union signed the Partial Test Ban Treaty, which prohibited all nuclear tests in the atmosphere, in space, and underwater. The Tsar Bomba was never meant to be a practical weapon. It was a singular event, a scientific and political statement made with terrifying force. It marked the peak of the nuclear arms race, a moment so extreme that it forced humanity to take a step back from the brink. The Devil's Bomb was a monster, but it was a monster that ultimately taught us a vital lesson about the limits of power and the absolute necessity of peace. Thank you so much for watching. The story of the Tsar Bomba is a powerful reminder of a time when the world was on a knife's edge. If you found this journey into history fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. We'll see you in the next video.